my energy consultant came back to me one day and said, well, your energy budget is 14 and a half kilowatt hours per year. And I looked at him and I said, what the heck are you talking about? And he said, that's your energy budget for your kitchen. He said, you have to add up all the energy requirements by your operational standards, and that can't add up to more than 14 and a half kilowatt hours per year, because we can only generate 25, let's just say, what I forget what the number was. Nobody in my years at Hyatt did anybody tell me what an energy budget was. Nobody designed kitchens for energy use in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s.
Welcome to Buildings and Beyond,
the podcast that explores how we can create a more sustainable built environment
by focusing on efficiency, accessibility, and health. Hi, this is Kelly Westby, and for this month's episode, we are really excited to share with you. We had Chef Christopher Galarza on the podcast in February 2021, and it was one of our most popular episodes. We talked a lot about the induction cooking learning curve and kitchen safety and the not so great atmosphere that chefs find themselves working in. In the meantime, since that episode, Christopher has been working on a lot. He's been doing research on commercial kitchen air quality, developing a new standard for commercial kitchens, and publishing a new book on the impact of sustainability on the restaurant industry. So we knew we needed to have him back on the podcast to catch up. And this time we asked him to bring a friend. So today we have two chefs that you'll get to know. Welcome, Chef Chris, to the podcast. Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Chef Chris Galarza. I am the founder of Forward Dining Solutions, co-founder of EcoChef, president of the Pittsburgh chapter of the American Culinary Federation, and also president of the Pittsburgh Culinary Initiative. I am the nation's leading expert in commercial kitchen electrification and decarbonization, and have focused my career now, and hopefully the rest of my career, on sustainable hospitality. I am also the best-selling author of Understanding the Green Industrial Revolution, an interdisciplinary look at the hospitality industry.
I love it. That's fantastic. And Duke, on the show for the first time here today, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Got my start at Howard Johnson's at the Turnpike, frying clams on a Friday night when I was 15 years old. So it's been close to 50 years. Went to Penn State. I started to think about what I could do to give back to the restaurant industry. The things that I've learned, especially abuse of energy and people along the way. And my wife and I started to think about Reform Cafe at Windswept, which is now our love and brainchild that we've been working now for 7 years. Cafe has been open just 5 years, and there's a lot to share and a lot to people to think about.
This episode is sponsored by the Passive House Accelerator. I'd like to encourage you all to check out Passive House Accelerator. It is an online community and media company dedicated to accelerating the transition to clean, resilient, zero-carbon buildings. Among many things, the Passive House Accelerator hosts live online educational gatherings, puts out YouTube videos, publishes a magazine twice a year, hosts the Reimagine Buildings Conference Series, and even has their own podcast. If you want to learn more, please visit passivehouseaccelerator.com. So our conversation with Duke and Chris starts with a discussion on the evolution of induction cooking in terms of technology as well as public perception, and the reality of working as a chef during the clean energy transition. Then we'll take things broader with a holistic approach to sustainable commercial kitchens, using Chef Duke's Reform Cafe as a case study for what is possible. Both Christopher and Duke remind us that education and collaboration are keys to success. And so I hope you learn something from our chef guests. And I hope that it reminds you to invite the people who work, live, and play in your buildings into the sustainability discussions up front. All right, now let's dive into the episode. We did talk a lot about induction last time. Chef Chris, I'm curious, since we spoke, what kinds of advancements have there been specifically in induction? What's changing either in the public perception side or in the technology side?
Oof, that's a huge topic.
Or separate them. We'll do one at a time.
No, it's great. No, this is great. So like a lot has changed since we talked. For starters, walks are more prevalent, right? They're out there. We know of a lot of walks, especially in China, that are being developed. Some of them are even automated. So you have one chef who can manage a line of 5 walks, for example. There is infrared.
And that was a big debate, right? Last time that we were talking about, people said, no, you can't do wok cooking with election.
And people were saying that it would disproportionately hurt chefs of color and all these things, which again, not true. But we have now folks like Martin Yen, who's an outspoken advocate for induction cooking, and I just got to meet him for the first time last week. There are folks who another all-star, I would say, Chef 2 David Fu, who was on Top Chef, who's releasing a cookbook. I'm going to plug my friend's book coming out September 10th. Go ahead and get it. They're outspoken advocates because they just see how much better it is, right? Never mind the fact that each wok has a potential of saving 250,000 gallons of water per wok per year, right? Never mind all these things. Simply put, we are now seeing that technology is able to meet the demands of our 21st century chefs, of our 21st century restaurants, and is able to allow us to refine our tradition while allowing us being good stewards to our staff, to our guests, as well as the planet. But
wait, take me a step back.
Sure.
You said never mind the water savings, but I mind it.
Okay.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah,
why is there? Where is the water savings coming from?
A traditional gas wok is 100,000 BTUs. It's essentially a jet engine underneath a wok. So to cool it down, because this type of heat will warp metal over time, it's constantly cycling water through, constantly rolling water through to cool it down. So by eliminating that radiant source of heat and using induction, which is able to work with the molecular structure of the pan to heat the pan up really quickly and still keep the wok case, still keep how everything works, you are able to reduce the need for having to constantly flow water. So instead of just, again, having water constantly flow and using it to clean the wok and have the machine cool down, now you just need the water to clean the wok.
Clean in between.
So it's a radical reduction of water consumption. And on the West Coast, water is as good as gold. And as we go on here, I'm assuming it's going to be like that around the world. But that's a pretty substantial savings, I would say. And I would say as well that it's an important thing to talk about. So thank you for stopping me. So then there's other technologies that are coming out, like radio wave cooking. I've seen demonstrations where they had a red snapper and a block of ice, and they cooked the snapper and never melted the ice. Right? There's a lot that's happening now. There's the new generation of combination ovens that include microwave as well as steam and convected heat. So there's a lot coming out. What was the other part of your question?
Public perception.
Public perception. The public's talking about that. Since you and I spoke, a lot has changed. A lot has happened, especially last year, 2023. So when you and I spoke, I had essentially just started focusing on the company full time. And no one was talking about electrification. So the fact that we even had that conversation, I felt like it was a blessing. So thank you. And now you see tweets that are God, guns, and gas stoves, right? People are talking about it. It became a big thing, so much so that my infant company was mentioned in Time and CNN and Bloomberg and Fast Company, and there was a Nova documentary as well. Like it just became such a topic, and there was no one talking about it. So we found ourselves in the middle of all this controversy, but people are talking about it, which is I can't stress that enough. So that's, although mostly negative, the general public fully
some controversy is better than silence.
Exactly, but people are interested in it.
I think it is, depending upon where you are too.
True.
We're State College, home of Penn State. 85% of the people within 20 miles have something to do with Penn State. Very highly educated, also very
True.
highly international community. Nobody that is in Europe is surprised about induction cooking. They've been using induction
Not at all.
for decades. In Asia,
Yep.
they've been using induction for decades. So I think in the education in some of the towns around you, especially college towns, or towns like San Francisco, where it's big international communities, they welcome the talk of induction and electrification. I think it's the more rural and suburban areas that we need to concentrate on
Yeah.
with that community message.
Yeah, and to add on to that, so we went from no one talking about it to there being public backlash with the idea of us even investigating what are the poisons coming out off of gas stoves, to now over 131 cities and jurisdictions across the country have passed electrification ordinances. That is about a little over 10% of the population now affected by these ordinances, which is going to reduce. I think I saw numbers somewhere in like $57 billion of savings in healthcare costs over the next 10 years, right? It's a crazy number. So like, and this is across just 11 states, right? So imagine what's going to happen. And what I tell folks is that now that people are talking about it, this is no longer an if. It's a matter of when. When is this happening? Not is this going to happen, but when. And that's because, those who are decrying that this is not something we can do, they're in red states, and not to make this political, but they're in red states, and their infrastructure is electrified, right? North Carolina, I think 91% of their homes cook with electric stoves. Florida, I think it's number one state for all electric building design was 78 of their building stock. 78% of their building stock, is all electric. Texas is now the number one state for renewable energy. So despite the big brouhaha, they're actually ahead of the blue states. And the blue states are where the gas stoves are. Because contrary to popular opinion, as Americans, 68% of us, or something to that effect, cook on electric stoves. So no red state can tell a blue state what to do. Blue states want to do this, therefore it's going to happen. So
Will happen.
no longer an if, but rather a when.
And pulling us back from the politics, but towards one other thing that you brought up here, which is the health and safety aspect.
Yeah.
So the carbon emissions reduction is important for our long-term health for our children's children. But what about right now? So can you talk a little bit about what you've learned, in the last 5 years about health and safety, anything you've changed your mind on, anything you're working on now?
Yeah. So what we've learned is that when we combust, fossil fuels, we release a lot of things, right? A lot of particulate matter, or if you hear the term PM being tossed around, or volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. These things get released into the air. We breathe them in, and those are the things that irritate our lungs. Those are things that can exacerbate things like asthma or whatever the case is. I've since learned about childhood asthma. Right, we had a study. But there was a study that came out December.
The royal we.
The royal we. December of 2022 with RMI, and I think it was the Albert Einstein School of Medicine, that showed a population. Well, to hear them say it, it's like, of course, that's all it was. But I spoke to one of the authors, and I was like, how did you get this? And what they found was that by collecting 50 years worth of studies, they did what's called a population attributable fraction, which is, to hear them say it, just a simple mathematical equation. And then they arrived at the fact that with 50 years worth of data, it posits that 12.7% of children in the United States today have asthma that they could directly attribute it to gas stoves, which roughly comes out to 650,000 children alive today. And a recent Baltimore study, I think in 2015, showed that Black and brown children are 8 times more likely to die from asthma. So that is where people started to talk about maybe we should look into the health and safety aspect of gas stoves, which triggered what they now call Stovegate. So that's a real term. So so we learned a lot, right? We learned a lot about what's coming off of gas stoves. We learned a lot about the carbon monoxide. We learned a lot that the fact that this country doesn't have indoor air quality standards.
Yeah, adequate ventilation.
Exactly. There's no real standard for indoor ventilation at all. Some have it, some don't. So it's pretty much a grab bag.
Yeah, there are standards for new construction, but are those systems actually working properly? And for all of the existing stock, what was enforced at that time? There's most ventilation systems, even if they were designed to some sort of standard, are not working to that standard,
right,
and are not working for our health.
There was a study recently that showed that in the furthest part of the house, even after cooking has been done, they found benzene levels above that of a secondhand smoker. Right, in a house where people smoke, they found benzene levels even higher than that. We know that there is no safe level of benzene. So we've learned a lot about it, and what we're working on now is we are working with those same team of scientists on an indoor air quality study for commercial kitchens. It's a first of its kind study. Hasn't been done as far as we can tell anywhere in the world, and what we're trying to do is simply figure out what is it like to be a chef. How hot is it? What's the humidity level? What's our exposure rates in any different parts of the kitchen? So we're looking at that now, and I'm really excited about that. They're the science folks. I'm just finding them kitchens. So
and that's fantastic because last time we talked, you had the anecdotal evidence of the chefs are in the kitchen, they're hot, they're angry, like it's not good working conditions, it's not healthy, and it's not good for our mental, emotional health. And we just think that's the way it has to be. And it turns out it doesn't have to be that way. And you were seeing that anecdotally. And now you're saying, okay, let's bring the other folks in and let's test what the real conditions are. That's exciting. I can't wait to see those studies and have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, we're gonna keep beating those 5-year projections. So that's gonna be a really, really exciting study. I can't talk too much about it because it's still in its infancy, but the data that we're seeing is pretty exciting. Not exciting, it's just pretty eye-opening. Yeah. But yeah, so that's
exciting in that there's an opportunity for improvement.
I would say yes, and also in the fact that for the first time in our history, we're actually able to pinpoint, quantify, understand what we go through as chefs, right? People love to kind of paint us with a broad stroke that we're just these rock stars that are just, creating alchemy with food and colors, and we're living the life of luxury. But the reality is a lot more grimmer. And I hope it gives people, if anything, an understanding of what we go through for our craft, for our art, just to be able to give people a little bit of joy when they come and visit us.
I was going to say on the anecdotal side of it, and it's more from advocacy. When we looked at Reform Cafe, we wanted to build a commercial restaurant in an agricultural zone. We were told you can't do that. It took us 2 years to convince the local municipalities that a farm cafe that uses its own food and food from other local farms is just an extension of a farm. It is not a Burger King in the middle of a grassy field. So what my wife and I had to do actually was, and this is based on some models that we saw in California and Michigan and Vermont, we actually had to write a local farm-to-table farm cafe ordinance for the local municipalities that they could adopt that would allow a farm cafe in an agricultural zone. And that's part of that learning process. Advocacy, you can't give up. And that old saying that all politics is local, boy, I'm learning that all code is local as well. that if you want national code to
Wow.
change, you have to convince the local code officers that their code should exceed the national standards. And that, I think, is what our challenge is as operators now, is to start to work and educate not only our community, but our municipal enforcers and code and politicians, that it's worthy of their consideration for the health of their communities, that they take a real serious look at some of the data points that Chris and others have been willing to share.
Yeah, it's funny. Both of your stories led me to think about this quote I was looking at earlier that was something along the lines of success is not the absence of failure, it's refusing to ever give up. And
I
so
like that.
I think you two are both very stubborn, and I really appreciate that.
For the first time ever, I can't wait for my wife to hear that and hear that. She's gonna be like, "Oh, that's a positive now, huh?"
I actually had it tagged as a wedding quote. So
I
yeah.
love that. I love that.
So this is the first time ever that we have had the pleasure of having two chefs on this podcast today. And normally we are talking to architects and engineers and developers, and we're always talking about sustainability, decarbonization, accessibility, equity. And we are gathered here today to take kind of a new lens of that, or I guess building off of Chef Chris, your previous conversation about how to integrate sustainability into commercial kitchens. And so both of you come at it from a different angle, but both have gotten excited about the sustainability world with relationship to hospitality, with relationship to commercial kitchen. So I'm curious, how did the two of you meet and get and realize your shared passion for this?
Duke, why don't you take it away?
Our original thought was for this new project toward my retirement. I call it my retirement project. Was to think about being off the grid as much as possible. I was enamored with a lot of Argentinian style cooking with brick ovens and trying to share with the community some sustainable ideas for them, their community, their home cooking, but obviously for the restaurant industry as well. Met a bunch of smart people in the sustainable industry, and they all said the same thing. What are you teaching your community if you're off the grid? Thinking about it, what came to mind was I'm not teaching them anything, because very few people in our community want to be off the grid. So what can we do to show them, introduce them to ideas, whether it is different ways to cook or different implements to use in the kitchen, or a different style of cooking that they can incorporate immediately in their own lives. And that'll make an impact, not only on them, their individual families, but also the community. And so we started to think about energy sustainability. We investigated all what was available to us here, meaning geothermal. We're on top of a limestone shelf. Geothermal wasn't really financially feasible here. We looked at wind turbine. We're about 2.5 miles an hour less on the average that would make that feasible for us. So we turned to solar. So we turned it over to our kitchen designers, our kitchen design team, our energy consultants, and with the idea of how much energy we could, in fact, generate here, being not at a desert and being limited solar days. And my energy consultant came back to me one day and said, well, your energy budget is 14.5 kilowatt hours per year. And I looked at him and I said, what the heck are you talking about? And he said, that's your energy budget for your kitchen. He said, you have to add up all the energy requirements by your operational standards, And that can't add up to more than 14 and a half kilowatt hours per year, because we can only generate 25, let's say, just say what, I forget what the number was. Nobody in my years at Hyatt did anybody tell me what an energy budget was. Nobody designed kitchens for energy use in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s. You, as a kitchen designer, you sat with the owner or partner, and they told you what they wanted for the themes for the restaurants, and you designed the kitchens around those themes, and then you added another 25% to make sure that you had enough equipment. I can tell you that not once in the 70s and 80s did anybody talk to me about energy.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's changed. You know, that we, and how Chris and I got started, I know this is long-winded, but the only way that we could possibly open our restaurant and be sustainably neutral, net zero energy, was to use induction equipment, electric.
So you had net zero as the goal from the beginning for your...
Net zero was our goal. We started to work with Living Building Challenge, and we were going for full pedal certification. Net zero water was easy for us. Net zero energy was a little bit tougher. And that electrification for the kitchen was natural for us, and that's all our efforts, was to be as efficient as we can with every piece of equipment that we had in the kitchen. Chris was introduced to me with the state of Pennsylvania, starting to realize that especially institutional wise, restaurant wise, educational opportunities, kitchens, electrification needs to be explored from the sustainability, sort of the outlet, but also from the safety of the kitchen staff. That had a lot to do with it, as both Chris and I worked in kitchens where temperature has always been a problem. And that's what kind of started us together, I think, on this journey.
Yeah, yeah. I learned about Duke and Monica years ago. Someone at Chatham shared with me a video of their project when it was still coming together, and I was really excited about more kitchens coming online that was electric. I was already talking my friends' ears off about it, and they were honestly sick and tired of it. And I saw, like, hey, another Pennsylvania kitchen doing this. Years later, actually the same year where you and I spoke for the first time, I was at a conference. I ended up getting connected with some folks from the state of Pennsylvania, Department of Environmental Protection, and we started working with them. We helped develop what's called the CHECK program with the state. And please bear with me. You know how governments love their acronyms. It stands for the Cooking and Healthy Electrified Commercial Kitchens. And the CHECK program, yeah, it's pretty cool, right? The CHECK program was designed to offer financial incentives for folks to begin to electrify. And what I really love about this program, and what we use to work with utility partners and hopefully more states across the country, is that we are putting this financial incentive behind the paywall of education, free education. So folks can come do a workshop with us, and that's how Duke and I got connected, is that we wanted to go and host Pennsylvania classes for Pennsylvania dollars. So my client and I went down to Duke and Monica's restaurant. We've obviously fell in love with it. It's a really beautiful location. And we held a demonstration there, very well attended. The food was incredible. And we began to sow the seeds of electrification, if you will. And that's how Duke and I really got connected. And every chance I get to go back, I can't resist myself.
I love that. And it sounds like you both connected on this idea of electrification, but both of you, it sounds like, takes a really holistic look at what sustainability means in a restaurant. You talked about net zero water. You talked about sustainable. I know last time, Chef Chris, we talked about sustainability using the whole food item,
Yeah,
using
right.
all the parts and pieces. What other sustainability aspects do you incorporate at Refarm Cafe? Duke?
Well, we're the right from the beginning. We wanted to take farm to table to another level. Um, Pennsylvania is, interestingly enough, the number one industry in Pennsylvania is agriculture. The number two industry in Pennsylvania is tourism. Um, and the restaurant industry obviously is a big part of that. So um, I think that our goal
So
was
you had a lot of opportunity there.
we had a lot of opportunity. Yeah, we wanted to make sure that our community understood what our goals were, and our goal was to become a better restaurateur, but also to bring small family farming to the forefront, especially interestingly enough, pre-pandemic, uh, the, the health aspects of eating as well, and it's a whole systems approach. It's always been whole systems as far as sustainable energy, is the quality of food. We're organic food. We work with local farmers. We work with community. It is 1,000 pieces to the puzzle.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic.
If I can
And
piggyback off of that, talking about holistically on the kitchen front, I was just speaking with a group of chefs, and you wouldn't believe how that message hasn't come across as an industry. I was I talked to them, and Duke, you'll back me up here. The very first thing you're taught as a chef to control your food costs is to look into your trash cans, right? How much food is going out that could be repurposed, right? Like we talked about in the first episode. And then I asked those chefs to take one more step back. How much water is going down the drain? How much does it cost you to temper the air that is now going up the ventilation system and out of your kitchen? How much does it cost you to clean the kitchen as far as labor is concerned? How much does it cost you in chemicals, right? And then once you start to unpack that, you realize that as an industry, we are incredibly wasteful. We are so worried about pinching pennies about, hey, we could have gotten an extra half an ounce of chicken off of the bone, but yet we're throwing away like 100 gallons a day of water, right? And what's the carbon? What's the carbon associated with that? What's the cost associated with that? And beginning to, again, sow those seeds and have those chefs think about that. Seeing those chefs go from, bored listening to a talk to perk up and go, oh, I didn't think about that, right? Realizing that we're working in an industry where 3 to 5% is our average profit margin, and realizing how much money we're throwing out, all of a sudden gives chefs a new perspective as to how to operate their kitchen.
And that was really interesting. I was actually listening to another podcast you did, Chef Chris, recently, and talking
Cool.
about the margin at on restaurants.
Yeah.
And when it's kind of like the saying of, when you're a carpenter, everything is a nail, and you're working at it with a hammer. Like the hammer is always the solution.
Yeah.
And I, for a chef, perhaps that's the food. It's always focused on the food. But what goes into making that happen? And can we look at it more holistically? So that is a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, I mean the role of a chef has evolved past just cooking, right? We are logistics manager, we're project manager, we're a peer mediator, we're a business, we're a financial advisor, right? We're accountants, we're business owners, we're a lot of things. Sometimes we're maintenance men, right? So we're a lot of things, and it's all about making sure that we can prioritize, we can focus, and we can begin to actually make changes that make sense. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad that the message is getting out there. People are thinking about it, because it is a very, very tough industry that could be made easier if we were to be cognizant of all the waste that's around us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interestingly enough, I've always felt that um, some of our operators, especially in the restaurant side, try to dumb down our business. It's an
Yeah.
amazingly complex business, and it's interesting from the chef standpoint. You'll have nouveau chefs. Nouveau chef to me is somebody that's under 50 years old, but they'll spend months learning about molecular gastronomy and all the little minute details to make uh, funny little air bubbles. Yet they won't sit down for 10 minutes to talk about energy savings in their kitchen.
Yeah.
So I think that part of what Chris does and some of the programs like Check and others around the country is trying to refocus uh, some of the things that really matter, and then get back to this realization that is, as the green technology wave hits us, it's something that needs to be embraced rather than ignored.
Yeah, and the implication for clean water, access to clean foods, is so strong in the hospitality and cooking industry. It seems like the access to those things is so critical for your product. So there's sort of a symbiotic relationship between the two concepts.
Well, and you do understand, and part of what drives me every day is simplicity is the essence of style and grace. So, boy,
I
I
love
like
that.
that.
great water makes great food.
Yeah,
I,
turns out.
I mean, it's the same idea as I see people do this in the kitchens, especially home kitchens, all the time. They'll want to make a great sauce, but they'll use the cheapest wine that they can find in order to make that sauce. Sometimes even bad wine just to get rid of it. Well, that's not what cooking is about.
Yeah, I used to tell my staff because they were asking like, Chef, can you get us this seasoning and that seasoning? And I was like, if you can't work salt and pepper right, you have no hope of working anything else. So let's start basics, right? Simplicity is the essence of style and
Fundamentals.
grace. I like that.
How did you two work through the Refarm Cafe and the sustainability initiatives there? What was the foundation? What education was available to you, Chef Duke, at the time to use at your disposal? What was available at the time, and then what have you learned since?
Um,
That's
so
the whole
much.
podcast right here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And a lot of it was
Just to dabble in
my learning curve was in the design phase of having to have an electrified kitchen, induction based, that was uber energy efficient and water efficient. We don't have an ice machine on our property because of the water waste. Um, we I actually had conversations with equipment manufacturers to make sure that what they were telling us, the energy efficiency of that they declared in their manuals was actually the case. Because I found out from some of the engineers that that's not necessarily a truthful thing all the time. And when you add
Yes.
a watt here and a watt there, it adds up pretty quickly. And we didn't have a lot of wiggle room as far as our energy budget was. So every all your Energy Star equipment, I actually called the manufacturers to double check a lot of the energy efficiencies, which I think that you need to do as an operator to understand how that domino effect really can take a hold in your kitchen.
Yeah, there's a very different thing to test a piece of equipment in the ideal circumstances under some very specific constraints within a lab.
Yes.
Than to have it operating within your own restaurant.
Yes.
And so that's really interesting. Were they able to provide you information or guidance from actual installations? I could imagine that they would be like, I don't know, once it's in your kitchen, like it's out of my hands.
Well,
How did those conversations go?
Yeah, well, my focus really was on induction. So, of course, much of the equipment in the U.S. is not produced here. Most of it is either Swiss or German, and really the biggest manufacturer and supplier of industrial induction equipment for kitchens is Garland, Manitowoc, who's a huge international company. But they're based, their American base is in Toronto. And so they invited me up to work with their engineers for 2 weeks. And we designed the unit based about my needs and also my understanding of what they were capable of doing. So it was an eye-opening experience. They work with a college up there that's a huge college. They provided complete induction suite kitchens for their culinary department there. And I spent a couple days with their chefs, actually working with the equipment. So I felt when I left Toronto that I did due diligence on my part, and I felt very satisfied that I wasn't going anything blindly.
Yeah, wow. That sounds like a very thorough understanding of the equipment before you actually even purchased it. That's fantastic. Bringing us to looking forward, as you mentioned, Chef Chris, when we have you both back in 5 years, or maybe even less, what do you think we'll be talking about then?
Yeah, we're one of those people that have the pieces together to really, they'll take us through the next 5 years, 10 years, I believe. So we have a variable speed hood that with the induction equipment allows our dining guests to get up right next to the chefs, the cooks, walk into the kitchen if they want, because nothing we do is hidden. We don't hide things with noise from the kitchen. We don't hide things from the smells of the kitchen. It's the openness is so refreshing, and our guests really appreciate it. And I think that's the way that the restaurant industry needs to move is to get back to that openness. You know, the whole thing about the 3-second rule with something dropping on the kitchen floor. That's kind of gotta get away as we look to the next generation of kids. I look for some advancements in some of some of the equipment. We have induction woks. We have an induction braising table, which is absolutely awesome. And then the hot tops. Love to be able to do something with ovens right now. You know, I know that they're working on it, but I think the more options that we have for the kitchens, the better. And convinced, you know, to be able to work in a kitchen, in an open kitchen, that you can have general conversations without yelling because of the sounds of the hood. I mean, it is just such a delight to work in those situations. I used to lose between 10 and 12 pounds of water weight every weekend in my old gas-fired kitchen. There are mornings now that we work that we actually leave our light jacket on to work.
I told you.
Yeah. And that is...
We talked about the winter coats in our last
It
episode.
is, it is so nice to be able to do that. So we know
Yeah.
we've made an impact on our staff, and we just need to get the word out better.
So keep plugging away
Yep.
at Refarm and keep advocating for
Yep.
more.
Well
I
said.
love it.
What I think will be the conversation here in the next 5 years will be how chefs have begun to lead this conversation. I want to hear, and what I hope to hear is people talking more about EcoChef, is talking more about the Green Industrial Revolution, is talking more about what we can do to be proactive, to lead the conversation, as opposed to getting dragged, kicking and screaming, waiting for Uncle Sam to make a decision, as opposed to us, the experts, informing where policy should be going, informing how we can work together to create rules and laws that are going to help our establishments, as opposed to having people who've never worked in a kitchen make decisions for us. So I'm really excited to see what, as we get these educations out, as we get these curriculums and these certifications out, the embrace from the hospitality community.
Yeah, and I love that about the way that we talked about your book having little nuggets across all different components of hospitality, about components of sustainability. You sort of level the playing field so that different people from different parts of the industry can talk to one another, because at least you have a nugget of understanding of where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And so how can those nuggets now help us get into even deeper conversations over the next 5 years?
It's all about creating conversations, all about creating eliminating any sort of division, right? So when I first started Forward Dining Solutions, it was we would get calls from an architect say, hey, I have a really stubborn chef, can you help us out? We'd come in, we'd have that conversation, we'd bridge the divide by speaking the language of an architect and speaking the language of a chef. And now we're giving folks the tools to say, hey, we've been successful at this, but we can't build every kitchen in America. I would love to, but we don't have that kind of time. There's over 1 million commercial kitchens in the United States alone. If we're going to make an impact, we have to start. I don't want to be the gatekeeper of this information. We have to start giving it out, or kind of offering it to folks in a way that they can be successful at it. And I think we have a really, really good system with EcoChef that I'm really excited to talk about.
And I think you brought us full circle on this particular episode with that, because we started your last episode. I pulled out this one quote that I loved that you said, which was, I don't know if I'm going to be the one to change the world, but I hope to inspire the people that do.
That still holds true.
And I think that's absolutely fantastic.
That still holds true. I feel like everyone should have that mindset. Like, just, again, do 1% better every day, and there will be someone there behind you that takes what you're doing and runs with it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Buildings and Beyond. This podcast is produced by Stephen Winter Associates. We make buildings perform better. Better for all the people who work, live, and play in them, and better for future generations. We are so grateful for our guests today, Chef Christopher Galarza and Duke Gastiger. Thank you to our podcast team, Rob Aldridge, Dylan Martello, Ian Slackus, Trisha Carr, and Heather Breslin. And if you want to learn more about our chefs, all of the different resources that we discussed in the episode today, please check out our show notes with lots of links and information. And we are excited to have you back next time.